chlorine from the pool smelled sharp against the night air, cutting through the heavy, sweet scent of blooming night jasmine. I sat at the edge of the patio, the glow of the overhead string lights reflecting off the harsh, white surface of the spreadsheet on my tablet. A localized breeze came off the California coast, rattling the fronds of the potted palms lining the stone columns, but it did nothing to lower the temperature of the financial disaster sitting in front of me. I tapped the screen, scrolling through another column of bleeding red numbers, my jaw tight. A shadow crossed the marble table. Aurora sat in the wrought iron chair opposite me. She wore a champagne-colored silk slip dress, the fabric catching the warm ambient light from the bulbs strung above us. A delicate band of lace edged the hem, resting just above her knee as she crossed her legs. I kept my posture rigid, the structured shoulders of my textured charcoal jacket suddenly feeling too heavy, too formal for the quiet of the evening. She didn't say anything at first. She just watched my hand. I was rhythmically tapping my index finger against the bezel of the tablet, a habit I developed when the numbers didn't align. Her fingers were cool. They reached across the marble and closed over my wrist, right above the leather strap of my watch. The sudden, slight weight of her hand stopped my restless tapping instantly. The background noise, the distant hum of the Pacific Coast Highway, the rhythmic churning of the pool filter, seemed to drop away entirely, leaving a sudden, heavy stillness in the space between us. It was a grounding wire snapping into place. The chaotic spinning of my mind, the endless calculation of risk and liability, simply went quiet. "You get very still when you want something," she whispered. Her voice was low, carrying the exhaustion of a woman who had been running a sinking ship for too long. I held her gaze. I didn't pull my arm back, I just looked at the faint, tired lines at the corners of her eyes, the resilience that kept her spine perfectly straight even when she was breaking. "I'm calculating," I said, my voice steady though my throat felt dry. "Calculating what, Jackson?" "How exactly I'm going to dismantle the man who did this to you." The next morning, the coastal sun glared through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel's back office. The air conditioning hummed a steady, mechanical drone that did nothing to alleviate the stale smell of old paper and bitter, burnt coffee. Aurora stood by the filing cabinet, her arms crossed tight over a tailored linen blazer, watching me dissect 3 years of her life. She had asked for a favor last night, a paid professional favor with a time limit of exactly 14 days before the mezzanine lender, Marcus Vance, initiated a hostile takeover of the estate. "He says I missed the balloon payment on the secondary tier," Aurora said, her voice tight. She picked up a stack of manila folders, then set them down again, her fingers betraying a slight tremor. "I made the transfer, Jackson. I swear I did. But the bank says it routed to a holding account, and by the time it bounced back, the default date had passed." I didn't look up from the ledger. I kept my eyes on the routing numbers. "You didn't miss it. He engineered the bounce." I pulled the K1 schedules and cross-referenced them against the mezzanine debt covenants Vance had drafted. It took exactly 80 seconds to find the trap. Vance hadn't just inflated the interest. He had buried a conditional routing clause inside a Shell LLC addendum. If the payment arrived after 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it automatically diverted to an unverified escrow, triggering a technical default. I closed the folder, flattening my hand over the cover. The technical mechanics were irrelevant now. What mattered was the sudden sharp exhale Aurora let out, her shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch. "It's a trapdoor," I said, keeping my tone entirely clinical to shield her from panic. "He built a maze you couldn't navigate and penalized you for hitting a dead end." "So I lose it." She looked out the window toward the ocean. 30 years of my family building this place, and Vance takes it because of a routing error?" "No," I said. I stood up, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt. You hired an urban strategist, Aurora. We don't complain about the maze. We tear down the walls. The resistance started on day 3. The office was stifling, the afternoon sun baking the glass walls. Aurora was pacing behind my chair, holding a binder of vendor invoices. Every time she flipped a page, she sighed, a small, frustrated sound that grated against the quiet of the room. She was used to being the boss, the matriarch, the one who hosted the galas and solved the crises. Having me, her son's best friend, a man 10 years her junior, sifting through her financial failures was a bitter pill. "I should have caught it," she said, dropping the binder onto the desk with a heavy thud. "I signed the addendum. I read it, Jackson. I didn't see the trap." "You're an estate manager, not a forensic auditor," I replied, my eyes fixed on the dual monitors. "That's an excuse." She walked to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. "Leo is going to come home from deployment, and his inheritance will be a foreclosure notice. I failed him." I stopped typing. The silence in the room stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I looked at her back, the rigid line of her posture. I almost reached out, almost stood up to close the distance, but I forced my hands to remain flat on the desk. Pity wouldn't help her. She needed a foundation, not a crutch. "Aurora, look at me." She didn't turn. "Look at me," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, carrying the weight of an absolute directive. She turned slowly. Her eyes were bright, defensive. "Vance's firm employs 12 corporate lawyers whose sole job is to draft paper that confuses intelligent people," I stated, delivering the facts with clean, brutal precision. "They targeted you because your asset is valuable and you were grieving your husband's passing when you signed the refinance. It is predatory. It is calculated. And it has nothing to do with your competence." She swallowed hard, her jaw tight. "It feels like my fault." "It's not." I picked up my pen. "Now sit down. I need you to authorize this forensic pull on the escrow accounts. We have work to do." She exhaled a shaky breath, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a quiet, determined focus. She sat in the chair beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of vanilla and bergamot on her skin. She reached for the authorization form. "Where do I sign?" she asked, her voice steadying. By the end of the first week, the rhythm of the back office had shifted into a strange, synchronized domesticity. We were working late into the evening. The California heat had broken, leaving the room cool and shadowed, illuminated only by the harsh glow of the monitors and a small brass desk lamp. Aurora was sitting on the leather sofa in the corner, reviewing employee schedules. I was at the desk, tracing the wire transfers. The silence wasn't tense anymore, it was productive. It was the quiet of a shared bunker. I heard the soft flutter of paper slipping to the floor. I glanced over. Aurora had fallen asleep, her head resting awkwardly against the arm of the sofa, the scheduling clipboard resting precariously on her knee. The harsh overhead light was glaring directly onto her face. I pushed my chair back, my movements deliberately slow. I walked over to the sofa. She looked fragile in sleep, the heavy mantle of boss entirely stripped away. I didn't touch her. I didn't brush the hair from her face or linger over the softness of her features. Instead, I carefully lifted the clipboard from her knee and set it on the coffee table. I walked to the wall switch and killed the overhead fluorescents, plunging the room into the soft, warm amber of the desk lamp. I pulled the spare wool throw from the back of my desk chair, unfolded it, and draped it over her shoulders. It was a functional movement, keeping her warm, keeping her rested. As I stepped back, she stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked disoriented for a fraction of a second, staring at the dark room, the blanket, and then me. "What time is it?" she mumbled, sitting up slightly. "Go back to sleep," I said softly, returning to my chair. I have the routing numbers. I'm just building the timeline. I shouldn't sleep while you're working. You don't have to be the boss in this room, Aurora. I didn't look at her as I spoke, keeping my eyes on the screen to give her privacy. Close your eyes. I've got the watch. I heard the soft rustle of the wool blanket as she settled back down. A profound, heavy silence filled the office, broken only by the quiet click of my keyboard. For the first time in years, the isolation of my work felt like a sanctuary rather than a void. The peace shattered on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. I was at the front desk, reviewing the occupancy logs with Elena, the hotel manager, when Aurora walked into the lobby. Her face was entirely drained of color. She was holding a stack of mail, but her hands were trembling so badly, a few envelopes slipped to the marble floor. "Jackson," she said. Her voice was hollow. I crossed the lobby in 3 strides. "What is it?" "The payroll." She looked up at me, panic finally breaking through her composed exterior. "I tried to run the payroll. The system kicked it back. I called the branch." I already knew what she was going to say before the words left her mouth. "They froze it," she whispered. "All of it. The operating account, the vendor lines, my personal checking. Vance filed a notice of default with the state." Elena gasped from behind the desk. "Okay," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of panic. I needed to be the anchor to her storm. He jumped the timeline. He knows we're auditing the escrow, so he's trying to starve you out before we find the proof. "I have 80 employees, Jackson. They have rent. They have families." Her voice cracked. "If I can't pay them by Friday, they walk." The hotel closes. Vance wins. He doesn't win. I took the envelopes from her shaking hands. We just changed the battlefield. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in attrition. The atmosphere in the hotel turned brittle. Vendors started calling, demanding payment. Elena was holding off the staff with promises, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Aurora retreated. She spent Wednesday evening in the empty grand ballroom, sitting alone on a covered chair, staring at the unlit chandeliers. I found her there just after sunset. The room was cold, smelling of floor wax and dust. "The linen supplier cut us off," she said to the dark room. "We can't turn over the rooms tomorrow. It's over." I walked across the hardwood floor, my footsteps echoing. I didn't offer empty platitudes. I didn't tell her it would be fine. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my inner jacket pocket and handed it to her. She looked at it in the dim light. "What is this?" "It's a cashier's check, drawn from my personal accounts. It covers the payroll and the critical vendors for the next 2 weeks." She dropped the paper on her lap like it was burning her. "No, absolutely not. Jackson, I can't take your money. You're Leo's friend. You're a consultant. I won't drag you down with me." "You aren't dragging me anywhere." I kept my voice perfectly measured, stripping all emotion from the delivery. "This is an operational bridge loan, secured against the eventual release of your accounts. It is a calculated risk, and I am a man who understands risk." "Why?" She stood up, her eyes flashing with a sudden defensive anger. "Why are you doing this? You don't owe me this. You don't have to save me." "I'm not saving you." I took a step closer, holding my ground. "I am funding the time I need to destroy Marcus Vance. You built this place. You bled for it. I am not letting a paper pusher steal it because of a manufactured technicality." She stared at me, her chest heaving slightly. The anger fractured, leaving only raw vulnerability. She looked down at the check, then back up at my face. I held her gaze, holding the silence, letting the absolute certainty of my decision settle over her. I was not leaving. I was not backing down. She let out a shaky exhale, the fight leaving her. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Thursday morning, the Bank of Coastal Commerce, downtown Los Angeles. The conference room was entirely glass, sterile, and intimidating. Marcus Vance sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by two junior counsel. He wore a bespoke suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The branch manager, a nervous man named Hayes, sat to his right, adjusting his tie. Aurora sat beside me. She wore a sharp, navy blue tailored suit, her posture immaculate. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a queen surveying a rebellion. I sat to her left, my hands resting flat on the polished wood, an unmarked black binder positioned squarely in front of me. "Aurora," Vance said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, but the covenants were clear. You missed the window. The freeze is standard procedure to protect the asset." "Standard procedure," I repeated. The room went silent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Let's talk about standard procedure, Mr. Vance." I opened the binder. I didn't look at him. I looked directly at Hayes, the branch manager. Section 4 of the binder contains the SWIFT network routing logs for Mrs. Evans' transfer, I stated, sliding a thick stack of stapled paper across the table to Hayes. "As you can see, the funds arrived at the clearinghouse at 1:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, well before the 2 p.m. cutoff. Vance scoffed. "Our system didn't log it until 2:05. The system is automated." "Your system is automated to a holding account that your firm controls," I countered, sliding the next document forward. "This is a forensic trace of the holding account. It is registered to a Shell LLC in Delaware, of which you, Mr. Vance, are the primary beneficiary. You deliberately delayed the internal clearing process to manufacture a default." Vance's smile vanished. "This is absurd. You have no authority to access those logs." "I didn't access them. A federal auditor did, upon my formal request filed 3 days ago regarding suspected wire fraud." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table, closing the trap. "This is a direct violation of Regulation B regarding discriminatory lending practices, compounded by intentional interference with contractual relations." I turned my attention back to Hayes. The branch manager was sweating now, looking at the routing logs with wide eyes. "Mr. Hayes," I said, my voice quiet, lethal. "If this freeze is not lifted in exactly 10 minutes, my next meeting is with the State Banking Commission. Your branch will be named as a co-conspirator in a fraudulent asset seizure. Do you want your signature on that?" Hayes looked at Vance, then at the paperwork. He picked up his phone. "I'll authorize the release immediately." Vance stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This isn't over. You still owe the principal, and she will pay it, to a different lender, under new terms." I finally looked up at Vance, my expression completely blank. "Your contract is scrapped. If you attempt to enforce the penalty clauses, the federal auditor will be very interested in the Delaware LLC. Get out." Vance opened his mouth, closed it, and walked out of the room, his lawyers scrambling behind him. The heavy glass door swung shut. The silence in the room was deafening. Aurora sat perfectly still for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand over mine, right where it rested on the mahogany table. Her grip was tight, transferring the sudden, overwhelming relief straight into my bones. The tremor in her fingers slowly stopped. The world stopped spinning. "You did it," she breathed. "No," I said, turning my hand over to lightly grip her fingers. A functional connection to keep her grounded. "We did it." Friday afternoon, the patio of the estate. The California sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. The string lights were already on, casting the same warm glow over the marble table where this all started. Elena was standing nearby, holding a clipboard, a massive grin on her face. Payroll cleared, Mrs. Evans. The vendors are paid. The new linen delivery is unloading in the back. Thank you, Elena, Aurora said. Aurora was standing at the head of the table. She wasn't wearing a suit today. She wore a simple, elegant sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked 5 years younger. I was standing beside her, packing my laptop into my leather briefcase. The job was done. The new financing was secured through a legitimate bank. My role as the forensic consultant was officially over. I zipped the bag, the sound loud in the quiet evening. I picked it up, adjusting my grip. It was time to leave. Jackson. I stopped. I turned to face her. She picked up a document from the table. It was the finalized contract with the new lender. She held a pen out to me. The new bank requires a secondary signatory for the Operational Oversight Board, she said, her voice steady, loud enough for Elena and the remaining staff to hear clearly. I don't want a consultant. I want a partner. I looked at the pen, then at her face. The implication was clear. It wasn't just a business title, it was a permanent anchor to the estate. To her. It's a heavy commitment, Aurora, I said quietly, offering her one last chance to step back. I don't do things halfway. I know, she said. She stepped closer, closing the distance, leaving no room for retreat. That's why I'm asking. I took the pen. I leaned over the marble table and signed my name on the bottom line, the ink permanently binding my future to hers. I set the pen down. When I stood up, she was right there. She reached up, her hands resting lightly on the lapels of my jacket. The chaotic noise of the world, the business, the numbers, the risk, was entirely blocked out. There was only the sudden, profound stillness of the patio, the warmth of the evening, and the absolute certainty in her eyes. I leaned down. The kiss wasn't frantic or desperate. It was a destination. It was the heavy, grounding drop of an anchor in a safe harbor. It was the feeling of locking something in place, a promise sealed without a single word. When I pulled back, she was smiling, a real, unburdened smile. I kept my hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a steadying force as we turned to watch the sun finally dip below the horizon. Looking back now, I realize that true security doesn't come from a perfectly balanced ledger or an ironclad contract. I learned that healthy love isn't about rescuing someone from their life. It's about standing beside them with absolute consistency so they have the strength to fight their own battles. Real partnership is a sanctuary built on trust and showing up, day after day, when the world demands you break. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.